Good evening. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. It's a story of big business, big pressure, big money, and the crime of cocaine. It's the story of how and why the FBI caught automaker John Z. DeLorean, and it became a bit clearer today. Gary Shepard reports from Los Angeles.
A flying service in California's Mojave Desert, a posh motel in Newport Beach, a small bank south of San Francisco, all pieces of the intriguing puzzle of how John DeLorean became involved in a $24 million cocaine deal. The pieces are now beginning to fit together.
CBS News has learned from reliable sources inside the investigation that the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Los Angeles designed the plan that brought John DeLorean together with William Hetrick, described by authorities as one of California's biggest cocaine dealers. Here's how it worked.
By last May, federal undercover agents were aware that Hetrick needed to hide huge amounts of cash being generated by his drug operations. The agents offered to set up a money laundering scheme at the Eureka Savings and Loan Association a few miles south of San Francisco. Hetrick jumped at the opportunity, agreeing to pay them with cocaine. 2 months later, John DeLorean approached a government informant who knew Hetrick at a hotel in Newport Beach, California. The flamboyant auto executive said he was interested in arranging a drug deal to raise $60 million to save his failing sports car company. Law enforcement sources tell CBS News Assistant U.S. Attorney James Walsh dreamed up the idea of introducing DeLorean to drug dealer Hetrick. The plan was carried out, and DeLorean's subsequent meetings with the dealers were then videotaped by federal authorities, who finally arrested him earlier this week. The question of entrapment, whether John DeLorean was unlawfully lured by federal agents into committing a crime, is one strategy DeLorean's new attorney will have to tackle, although experts say it is not likely to work. Joseph Ball, 79 years old, took over the case late yesterday.
What about bail, sir?
I think the bail will be posted.
When?
Probably Monday or Tuesday.
Ball is one of Southern California's top criminal lawyers. In the Mojave Desert today, aircraft and other equipment owned by Hetrick's aviation firm were impounded by the Internal Revenue Service, along with 2 luxury boats in Florida, part of a $6.5 million tax lien for alleged income tax evasion growing out of Hetrick's drug operations.
Ironically, there were reports today that while all this was going on, a loan broker in Cleveland was on the verge of approving a $200 million loan that could have saved DeLorean's company. Gary Shepard, CBS News, Los Angeles.
When the DeLorean car first rolled out of the factory in Ireland last year, much of America was rooting for its success. Its creator, former General Motors executive John DeLorean, had thumbed his nose at the big automakers, saying he'd show the industry how to build cars. DeLorean started his own company and urged consumers to share his fantasy.
Live the dream. Drive the DeLorean today.
The car's glamorous image was enhanced by DeLorean himself. A former GM whiz kid, he was also a maverick. His flamboyant private life raised eyebrows in corporate circles. He was a big spender who loved beautiful women and was obsessed with his youthful appearance. In 1973, he left his $600,000 a year job at GM, claiming the industry was so immoral, the climb to the top was no longer worth it. He set out to make what he called an ethical car.
I'm sure that, like anything else, there are a certain number of people with amounts of jealousy who would like to see us fall on our face. We're not going to do that.
It took 7 years from the inception of DeLorean's dream to the first car. In that time, the economy sagged and car sales collapsed. But because of astronomical startup costs for any car company, analysts say DeLorean was doomed to fail.
I think in these days of multi-billion-dollar investments in new automobiles, that it's impossible to fight General Motors, and for that matter, it's impossible to fight Chrysler and Ford and Honda and Datsun.
Those who work for DeLorean say the prospect of failure panicked him, clouding his judgment. He began to produce more cars without waiting for demand to catch up.
Building to inventory is not a good, sound business practice in the automobile business. And DeLorean did exactly that last fall. And I think that was one of the key elements in the final demise of the company.
Finally, this week, the end. The closing of the company, the arrest on drug charges. Ironically, it is now, during DeLorean's nightmare, that his dream may finally come true. In the last 2 days, DeLorean sales have boomed and prices have jumped, spurred by hopes that the car will be a collector's item. As for DeLorean, some say he failed because he became like the Detroit executives he despised, driven and finally desperate for success. Linda Douglas, CBS News, Beverly Hills.